The Cincinnati Bengals wideout situation is one of the juiciest in fantasy football because while one receiver is the best in the game, the other has proved to be equally dominant. And right now, they are both up for grabs in Dynasty. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Nate Liss, and for those of you tuning in for the first time, thank you for checking it out. Now, unless you've been trapped underneath a fallen tree for the last 2 years, you are probably well aware of the fact that Jamar Chase and Tee Higgins are the most dynamic receiving duo in the NFL today. And if you play in Dynasty Fantasy Football Leagues, then there has probably never been a better time to acquire either one of these players than right now. Now, while everybody with a default egg emoji on Twitter is yelling at me for telling the truth still hurts. And yes, I like my own posts. But this is exactly why Jamar Chase is finally at his cheapest price tag of all time. Because for as many analysts who say they prefer the boom-bust player with a ceiling, literally none of them ever classified Jamar Chase as a player with this many up and down weeks. They just assumed he was bulletproof, unlike Tyreek Hill, unlike Julio Jones. Players with immense ceilings and weekly floors that I guess leave you scratching your head. Because Jamar Chase has been and still probably is most people's wide receiver one overall, but a gap is opening up. As you can see, our friends over at Keep Trade Cut are showing a growing trend between the two best receivers in football, Jamar Chase and of course Justin Jefferson. While Chase for months has long been the wide receiver one overall, we are now witnessing a gap of over 1,000 points in their system. Is the system perfect? Of course not, but no system is. That's why we have a plunger next to the toilet. But I believe this growing trend is happening for two simple reasons. The first is production to this point in the season, very obviously. Because while Justin Jefferson has almost identically disappeared over the prior 2 weeks, fantasy gamers are beginning to take note of the cold streak and start questioning their own player ownership, as Chase is now finished with less than 13 fantasy points in 3 consecutive outings. And as you can imagine, when I pointed these facts out on social media, I kept getting the, well, he's getting double teamed and he's getting triple teamed. And this is where the one fundamental difference between Justin Jefferson's recent 2-week disappearing act and Jamar Chase's show itself. And that's Tee Higgins. Because while Jamar Chase has found himself on the back of a milk carton in a missing persons ad for the past 3 weeks, Tee Higgins has produced fantasy finishes of 19.1, 14.3, and 25.4 fantasy points during that same span, while holding down an average target share of 25.6%, which would have been a top 10 usage last season. But Minnesota does not have a single player of Tee Higgins' caliber on their roster, so while Jamar Chase appears to be being outplayed, Justin Jefferson doesn't get any of the same scrutiny. Because while people convince themselves that Minnesota has to keep feeding Justin Jefferson to score points, at the same time, because of Tee Higgins, they believe Cincinnati can survive if Jamar Chase is taken away. And this galaxy brain perception is exactly how both Tee Higgins and Jamar Chase have become a value in Dynasty. For those of you who forgot, a little less than 1 month ago, Tee Higgins was viewed as a top 5 Dynasty wide receiver. And since then, it's been a complete roller coaster according to Keep Trade Cut. As you can see by the graphic, T, over the course of 1 month in September, went from the wide receiver 5 to the wide receiver 13, and now suddenly he's back inside the top 10, viewed as the wide receiver 9 overall. So the moral of the story is, if you've ever been regarded as a top 5 talent at your position, you're probably a stud. This goes for players like Chris Godwin, like Deontay Johnson, like DK Metcalf, and of course, like Tee Higgins. So rather than pay the absurd and often unjustified price for the consensus wide receiver 3, or wide receiver 4, or wide receiver 5, you can buy into a player who's averaging 15.5 fantasy points per game over his last 2 seasons, with the added upside of being linked to Joe Burrow and seeing softer coverages week to week because of Jamar Chase, and because of his weekly ceiling, which comes with 30 and 40 point performances. Because Tee Higgins ever being valued as the wide receiver 13 in Dynasty is the definition of not being valued at his ceiling. But what about Jamar Chase? Well, I am here to tell you that any amount of value that he loses is a good thing if you're looking to buy. Because to this point in Jamar Chase's career, just once has he ever had back-to-back weeks with less than 13 fantasy points in any given game. So to witness it happening in 3 consecutive weeks is astonishing. Because while the stat sheets may be disappointing as fuck, Jamar Chase is still amongst the tops in the NFL in route participation, target share, air yards, and red zone targets. Literally the only 4 metrics that matter. Are you on the field? Are you targeted often? Are you targeted explosively? And are you a factor around the red zone? Yes, 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 yes. Yes! So while the stat sheet may say that Chase is stinking up the joint, we understand that more is truly at play. For starters, Chase at this point in the NFL season ranks inside the top 7 in unrealized air yards, a metric that identifies the total distance of throws minus the yardage and gives us a better picture of a team's intentions for a player. Look, even last week, while it seemed like Jamar Chase was a non-factor in week 4, on his 6 targets, he still had an ADOT of 18.3, which clearly shows that Cincinnati is still searching for that home run play. But the real problem has been that Jamar Chase has been seeing double teams and triple teams and rolled coverages all season long. And through 4 weeks of the NFL season is inside the top 5 amongst wide receivers in targets versus man coverage. What's most interesting though is that while teams like Minnesota are moving Justin Jefferson into the slot at a rate 20% above his career average to avoid tough matchups, the Bengals are doing the opposite with Jamar Chase. They're running him out of the slot at a near career low rate of 8.3%. But dynasty owners should have zero fear investing in Jamar Chase, knowing that he is due for many more monster performances in the future. I mean, this is dynasty, right? And I believe that this big game drought ends next week in Baltimore. Because on the year, Baltimore ranks number 1 in the NFL in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers at 37.4 per game. This is a Ravens secondary that was beat up by Joe Flacco and the New York Jets, as well as giving up 154 yards to the dustiest version of Devontae Parker we've ever seen. So if you were ever looking to buy, this is the end of any window whatsoever. So if I can turn a player like Davante Adams into Tee Higgins, or find a way to turn a player like Garrett Wilson or even Saquon Barkley plus a piece into Jamar Chase, I am all over it. Because I believe that when the dust settles on week 5, all the discounts, they're over. Thank you guys for checking out my video. If you enjoyed the content, hit the like button, comment below, and don't forget to subscribe so you do not miss any future videos. Let me know what kind of trades you are thinking you would like to send for Jamar Chase before their next game in week 5. I would love to get back to you guys and talk about it. Saquon Barkley, with the injury history and the proven production that we haven't seen for years, is starting to bring itself back, but he will be entering his age 26 season, so he's a player that I view as a potential guy that I would move for Jamar Chase, knowing that we have a very long career with him and Joe Burrow ahead of him. Conversely, if anybody in your league is worried about Tee Higgins, knowing that Jamar Chase will inevitably be back in the fold, a player like Davante Adams, who's pushing age 30, and we know that the apex exists for players and the typical cliff where a wide receiver falls off, if I can package him into a deal to make my way into Tee Higgins, I am all over that. Guys, one more thing, please check out the Discord channel. The link is in the description. We have over 700 members in there. It's active 24/7. People are going at it all night long, talking fantasy, talking trades, looking at rosters. So if you want to join a fun community that never stops, click the link in the description, and I will see you guys next week.